Welcome to PERRLA 201. As I mentioned, I'm Grayson. We've got two of our customer support people who are on the call with us tonight, Jeff and April. They're going to be manning the chat while we're talking this evening. So if you have any questions you want us to cover or any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. They're going to be more than happy to get an answer right away. But we're also going to be logging those things that we can come back to, we can talk about later towards the end of this call. We are going to try to make sure we build some time into this hour together to answer questions that you guys may have here. As a reminder, our customer support team is always here every day until 10 p.m. Monday to Friday, that's 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Central Time, and Saturday and Sunday, 1 p.m. to 10 p.m. Central Time. You can email them at support@perrla.com. We're going to get an answer back to you really quickly. We're going to make sure that you're succeeding with PERRLA, you're succeeding in school, and that you're having a good time. As good of a time as you can have while you're writing, but that you're definitely not losing any of those points on your formatting. So tonight we're going to cover a couple of things. First, we're going to talk about some things that you need to know when you're writing a thesis or a dissertation or any kind of advanced paper, even if you're writing professionally. So we're going to talk about how these papers work with PERRLA and some special considerations that you need to think about from the beginning that can help save you a lot of time and headache down the road. We're also going to talk about sort of structuring your paper and the organization, and then how to kind of keep up with those files, just some best practices, especially when you're submitting that paper to your readers, to have them provide feedback as you're going through the different iterations, got different chapters that you're juggling, some ways that can help keep all those things organized. And then last, we're going to talk about research notes, how the PERRLA Google Chrome extension and our PERRLA Online application can be really helpful for you while you're doing your research in preparation for writing, right? As you're doing those classes, heading up to writing that dissertation or that thesis, ways that you can use PERRLA to sort of build a robust library of notes that you can use as you put together this big final paper. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. Bum, bum, bum. And we're going to hop on all the way over to Microsoft Word. Now, one of the first things I want to talk about is what version of PERRLA should you be using when you're writing an advanced paper? You're writing something like a thesis or a dissertation, right? With theses and dissertations, there are obviously the formatting requirements that are required by APA, MLA, and Turabian, right? You've got to do all the right formatting for each of those formats. But on top of those, your school is also going to have its own set of guidelines and formatting decisions that they've made that have to integrate into the APA and MLA and Turabian formatting alongside each other. That can be really complicated. So for a situation like a thesis or a dissertation, we always recommend to students that you try to use our Microsoft Word add-in and that you try to use it inside of the Word desktop application. So that's the version that you install on your computer locally, not the one that you're accessing through the browser. Word for Web, which is the web version of Word, right? It's kind of like Google Docs, access through a browser, is great. It's really powerful. But there are some real limitations in what Word has built into it, that it's just not as fully featured and as robust as what you are going to need when it comes to a dissertation or a thesis. So when it comes to doing things like section breaks, Word for Web just doesn't do that, and Word Desktop does. So that's why we recommend, if you're going to be writing a big paper like this, use Word Desktop. It's going to be your best friend. And using the PERRLA add-in with Microsoft Word is a great combination, because you're going to get all the benefits of PERRLA plus all the customization and formatting tools that are built inside of Microsoft Word. So really, the sky's the limit on what you're able to do. So that's the first thing. Use Microsoft Word. It's great. We do have, as you know, right, PERRLA Online, and we have lots of people who do write their dissertations or they do long works inside of PERRLA Online. You can do that. Just know with the caveat that PERRLA Online, like think of like bowling with the gutter guards up. You can only do APA, MLA, and Turabian formatting stuff. So if you've got stuff that's weird, that's different, you're not going to be able to do that in PERRLA Online, because we're going to kind of keep you in the straight and narrow. Whereas Word lets you sort of wander and meander wherever you want. Okay, that's the first thing to know out of the gate. Second thing to know out of the gate is that you kind of have two major paths here when it comes to working with a thesis or a dissertation. For a lot of schools, you're going to have a template already set up and provided for you for your dissertation. And you can see this here, right? We've got a template that's provided by our school, right? The University of PERRLA, for our doctorate of cryptozoology that we're working on. And it's got our title page. It's got all of the sort of parts laid out for us with our signatures pages, an abstract, dedication, acknowledgments, goes through the whole paper and gives us sort of a layout of what the school is expecting with the school's formatting built into it. And if that is the case, and you just really need PERRLA for references, for citations, and for heading styles, right? Adding headings and stuff into your paper, we've added a new feature that allows you to add PERRLA into this existing document. And I'm going to cover this one first because it's sort of the easiest, the most direct way to do this. If you already have an existing document, you have an existing template, what you can do is inside the PERRLA ribbon tab here up at the top, right? We can go to create a new paper, but instead of choosing one of these papers, we're going to choose other, okay? So we're going to do something else, right? And inside of the other tab, the very first option is add PERRLA to this paper. You're going to be able to add PERRLA to the Word document that you already have open. Now, this is not going to modify any of the formatting inside of the document. It's not going to sort of change anything out of the gate. It's going to add some stuff behind the scenes that's going to allow PERRLA to work. And it's going to set things up so that as you use PERRLA, you can add those references and citations in. So I'm going to say add PERRLA to this paper. And then we do need to give this paper a name. We're just going to leave it as dissertation template for now. Okay. Let's say add PERRLA to this paper. It's going to think for just a second. Ta-da! Congratulations. We've added PERRLA to this paper. Now, what did it do? Because this really looks the exact same. Well, it does two things. One, it adds some custom properties behind the scene that allows us to recognize this as your paper. And then two, it inserts all of the PERRLA styles that we use when creating the different parts of your paper or doing your formatting. So you get all these different APA or MLA or Trabian styles sort of built in at the moment. So now I can come over back into PERRLA and go to my references and citations panel. And we're going to come all the way down to the end of the paper here so you can see this, how this is going to work. We're going to take and we're just going to add a reference from my library. Okay, we're going to add this one here, Imagining Bigfoot by George L. Peck. Okay, when we add that reference to our paper, PERRLA is going to build a new references page, and it's going to build the reference onto it, right? So I can add another one, maybe this OpenAI reference, which you do need to disclose if you're using OpenAI or ChatGPT or anything like that. Bigfoot culture, you're going to see PERRLA is going to be able to add those references, build that reference section for us, allowed us to do references and citations with all the perfect formatting that you come to expect when you're using PERRLA, but it's going to do it inside of this document. Now, when we add that references page, we do always add that references page at the very end of the document. Okay, so in this one, you can see I actually have an Appendix A already in here, which is different from the APA, right? APA would just have appendix, and this would be on the second line. But this is the dissertation template because the school has its own additional formatting requirements that it wants me to put in. So what I could do in this case is I would say, yeah, I need to move this references page to where it kind of belongs. So I'm going to take and I'd come down here to PERRLA. I'd highlight all of this, right? I'm going to cut it out of that page. I'm going to come up here, excuse me, to my references section, and I'm going to paste it. Perfect. Just like that, right? I'm going to paste that in there. So now, as long as I did this correctly, which I think I did, as I add the Shadendorf, there you go. PERRLA is going to add that Shadendorf in the correct spot, right? So I've migrated the reference section that PERRLA made into the correct spot. Now I can come down here and I can clean up that page that's at the very end right there, right? So now I have PERRLA. It's working inside of the template that I already have. I've got all of PERRLA's special engine information and citations, formatting, and special rules, the whole 9 yards, right? It's all in there ready for me to use, and I can do that. All right. There are a couple limitations with this right now that we're working on. So there are some of those secondary features like title page, abstract table of contents, and appendices. Those don't work inside of these papers where you're adding PERRLA to a template because those sections already exist inside of your template, right? We're not going to overwrite them with something else. So those are disabled. And then tables and figures, those are coming, right? Those are going to be coming in the future. Right now, they're works in progress, okay? But we will be adding those into this as well. All right, so that's the first sort of method that you can get PERRLA up and running as quickly as possible if you've got that template. Let's talk about if you don't have a template or you want to just use PERRLA through the whole thing. Well, we can use the PERRLA method, right? We can take and we can build a research paper using PERRLA, and then we can modify that paper that PERRLA has built to match the expectations that our program is asking for us. So let's follow that path and see how it might work. So I'm going to say let's create a research paper because research papers are the most similar type of document to the dissertation or thing that I am trying to create. So we're going to make a student research paper because even though it's a doctoral level paper, I'm still a student, right, in that program. And most dissertation, even dissertation title pages, look a lot closer to a student title page, having similar information than a professional research paper, which is going to have less school information and also include paragraphs for you to add your professional authorship information like ORCID ID and stuff like that. That's down the road. So we'll make a student paper. We're going to call this a Bigfoot dissertation. I can put a course number. I could put instructor. I could put a due date. I can put all of that I want to. We're going to leave that empty for now so I can show you how you can customize that title page. All right. So I'm going to say create research paper. As you can see, PERRLA is going to generate our brand new document, just like it does every time we create a research paper with PERRLA, right? We have our title page right here, and we've got our body right here, and we don't have a references page yet. Now, when you're going down this method, the best thing that you can do is get the structure for the paper set up at the beginning. So the very first thing before you start putting in all of your content is get the different sections of the paper lined up and in place, and then start plugging your content into it, right? So if you know I need to have a title page, I need to have an abstract, I need to have a table of contents, I'm going to have 5 different chapters, I'm going to have a references list at the very end, I'm going to have 3 appendices, I need to have a page for signatures, all of that. Do that first. Get those pages set up at the very beginning so that you have the whole structure sort of there and ready to go, right? If you're going to be writing a chapter, what's the first thing you got to do? You got to organize your research. You got to get your ideas together. You got to build that structure for what you're going to write. We want to do the same type of thing with the document itself. We want to make sure that the document is set up correctly so that when we begin to write, we're going to put in our research, we're going to put in our ideas. We've got a solid structure for that to work around. We're going to have something that we're not going to have to try to go back and re-edit at the end. I don't know if you guys have ever tried working with Word. You get a couple hundred pages in. It's like, oh, I just need to make this one little change on page 4, and suddenly pages 80 through 105 are completely different, right? Doing this at the beginning can save you a lot of heartache at the end. So let's actually tackle some of that. And let's use this template that we have over here as a guide. All right. Let's say we want to actually take and kind of mimic this inside of our PERRLA paper. Well, as you know, PERRLA uses content controls to locate and keep track of certain elements inside of your paper, mostly references and citations, right? Content controls are these boxes that show up around content inside your paper. That's how Word allows us, add-ins like PERRLA, to keep track of information inside of the paper. All right. So there's a couple of those that are in there. The title page elements, where we know which each part of the title page is, and then references and citations. But we can work around those pretty easily. Okay. And if we want, actually, especially these on the title page, you can get rid of them in just a little bit, which is not a problem. So first thing we're going to need is we need the title of the dissertation by student name, right? So here we are, Bigfoot, a dissertation. Now, right now, my cursor is inside of that content control, right? That means I can't type. I'm trying to type. It's not going to let me. How do I get my cursor out of it? Really simple, really easy. Right arrow key once. You move from inside to outside the content control, and you're able to sort of start working again. Now, our dissertation template has this up higher in the paper, right? We're going to have an extra line by Serena Sparkles, right? We'll go down to a dissertation submitted to the School of whatever, right? We're going to just kind of keep on going there. Doctorate of Cryptozoology in partial fulfillment of the requirements, yada, yada, yada. Doctor of Cryptozoology, right? So I can modify this title page, come down here. Let's say this is going to be, right? This one actually doesn't have the school. Oh, it does up there. The University of PERRLA. So you know what we're going to do? We're just going to get rid of that whole line. That's okay. You can do that. That's not a problem. Graduate studies, right? The University of PERRLA. Right now on this one, I do need to make a manual change here. So that is single space instead of double spaced, right? It's kind of it's a weird thing that this dissertation is wanting. So that's what we'll do, right? Weird formatting. We'll come down here, Magicville and Oz, and October 2025, right? So there we go. We've got a title page. And we're going to kind of keep working through this. Now, one of the things that you can do that's really helpful inside of Microsoft Word is turning on something called show hide characters, right? Inside of different Word documents, there are all these different characters, and some of them are visible, like letters, B, Y, and some of them are invisible, like this paragraph mark here, or the space between A and dissertation, right? If you go into the home ribbon tab inside of Word, there's a little character. It looks like a backwards P, I guess, that direction. If you click this, it's going to show you all of the characters that are inside of your document, both the ones that are visible and the ones that are invisible. And as you go to work with the layout of a document, making sure you have those hidden characters turned on is going to be really illuminating, because you're going to be able to see all the different places where you have page breaks, you've got extra spaces, you've got weird alignment issues. You can see that and you can make modifications instead of having to sort of guess at what's there that you just can't see from the beginning. So when we do this, something here on the title page actually shows up, and it's a page break, right? What's a page break? A page break is like pressing the enter button or the return button on your keyboard, but like super powered. Instead of just going to the next line, it's going to go all the way to the next page. It's going to insert a break to the next page, right? And so we have page breaks, and PERRLA uses page breaks between the different sections of the document that it sets up. So for instance, right now there's a page break between the title and the body, right? We don't have any other additional sections in the paper yet, so let's fix that. Let's go into PERRLA and let's add that abstract, right? So I'm going to go to the abstract panel and say add an abstract. There you go. PERRLA is going to add my abstract, right? Here's where I can type my abstract. It's got a place where I can punch in keywords for it. And as you see, another page break right there, right? So that I have a break between the abstract page and the body. Now, lots of people may be tempted. You may be tempted when you go and say, oh, I need to have a break here, hitting enter, right? A whole bunch of times until this gets onto the next page like you want. That will get you where you want to go, but it's going to cause you all sorts of problems down the road, because what happens if I start typing here and here, right? Get a couple paragraphs. Those line breaks keep pushing all that content down the document. And so you have to go back and say, oh, I've got to backspace over these. So that's why we use page breaks, because page breaks will allow you to avoid, I get back here, to avoid that kind of modification as you keep writing, right? That page break, this is always going to start at the beginning of another page. So if we start adding extra lines in here, it doesn't affect the stuff that's below the page break on that new page. I've got to go all the way onto a new page here, right? That'll make 2 pages, but it just moves this one down to the beginning of the next page. So it's a way of keeping the different sections properly formatted without having to affect the formatting of each of the sections that you're working on, right? That's typing on page 4 and affecting stuff on page 80, avoiding that kind of headache, which Microsoft Word is pretty notorious for. Okay, so that's our abstract. Let's get a table of contents built in here, right? So we'll say add a table of contents, right? Now, PERRLA builds your table of contents based off the headings that are inside of your paper. And those are not just headings that you manually format, but headings that you create yourself. So let's actually add a couple of headings in here so we can see what we're talking about. All right. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and get our references section set up, right? So I'm going to go to references and citations. Now, there's two ways you can get a references section inside of your paper in APA. One is you can add a reference to your paper. As soon as you add that reference to your paper, PERRLA builds the reference section, puts that reference into it, right? In APA, it says, unless you have a reference to cite, you don't have a reference section. The other way that you can do that is you can actually add an appendix to your paper. So if you know you're going to need an appendix, when you add your first appendix to a paper, if there's not a reference section, PERRLA will go ahead and add that reference section in there as a placeholder for you. I don't know that we're going to need an appendix inside this paper, so let's just add a reference to our paper. Come on, there we go, zoom. We're going to add this OpenAI reference to our paper, right? PERRLA is going to add that references section. It's going to add the reference. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and remove that reference, right? It's going to leave that references page in there for me, ready to go. So I've got that set up now, okay? So now let's go and let's add a couple of those. That was odd. Let me reload this. This is very odd. Add reference from library, remove from paper. I think that fixed it. No, it didn't. Okay, I'm going to have to look into that. That's weird. AI, it's everywhere. It tracks us down. But we don't use AI in PERRLA at all. So I'm going to have to figure out why that's still there. I've been playing around with this a lot today. Maybe have to do with that. Let's close that out of the way. I don't want to think about that for a second. Let's take and add some of those headings, right? So we know we're going to have a couple of different chapters inside of our paper. I can take, and now that I have these other sections done, I can actually get rid of this title here. And I know that this is going to be chapter 1, right? Introduction, however you want to do it. I can style this, right? We're going to do these as headings. We want these to show up inside of our table of contents. Then we need to use the text and heading styles built into Word that PERRLA is providing for us. Okay, so I'm going to say this is a heading 1, right? Because it's the biggest heading that I have. All right. Now let's take and let's add a couple in here. I'm going to insert a page break, right? Because we need chapter 2 to start on a new page. So I can do this a couple different ways. One, I can go to the insert tab over here and you have an option for page break right here, right? If you're on Mac, you also get this at the top. You can go insert and go break, page break like that. You can also use a keyboard shortcut, right? You can, on a Mac, it's Command and Enter or Return. And on Windows, it's going to be Control and Enter. That's also a different way to add a page break. But I'm going to insert a page break right here. You can see it jumps me to a new page. It gives me an empty line. So let's say this is chapter 2. Let's say this is going to be a literature, review, reviewing existing literature that is there. Let's take and let's make this also a heading 1 by default, right? I can take and let's say there's actually going to be a couple different sections that I know I need to address inside this chapter, right? So section 1, let's add a section 2, section 3. I know I've got 3 sections, and these are going to be all heading 2s, right? So I can select heading 2 for each of these different paragraphs, just like that, right? I can add now another page break. Down here, I can say chapter 3, add a line, page break, chapter 4, right? Let's make those a heading 1 and a heading 1. So just a couple of headings, right? We can repeat this process, making sure we get that structure, that outline in place so that we've got a document that's ready and set for us to start working. Now let's go back up to our table of contents right here, right? PERRLA uses Microsoft Word's built-in table of contents processing engine, right? We're just going to make sure that we're providing with formatting that mimics the APA style, right? The APA manual doesn't actually provide any explicit guidance on what tables of content are supposed to look like. So what we do is we take the APA rules and we format the table of contents extrapolated from those general rules that they use for everything else, right? So that's why it's really important to use these headings inside of Microsoft Word to build this table of contents, right? If you just bold and center your text, PERRLA Word doesn't know that that's an actual heading. It just knows that it's text that's bolded and centered. You could bold and center anything. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a heading. So when you use one of our heading styles, it tells Word, hey, this is heading text. It's special. It's different from paragraph text. It's something that needs to go into the table of contents. All right. So when we go to the table of contents, we can right click, follow the instructions, and choose Update Field. When we do that, you can see that it's going to generate our table of contents, and it's going to build this for us with our page numbers built in, right? So now we say, great, we've got our table of contents. All of these are hyperlinked to the different parts of the paper, just like they should be. As we continue writing, right, we need to update this as we add. As I build out chapter 1, I build out chapter 2, I need to continue to add new things into, like new headings into those content. I can come back here and right click, and I know I say update field, right? I can update either just the page numbers or the entire table. So if it's just page numbers, right, you've just reorganized some stuff, you can do that. I usually like to update the entire table because it's going to pull in any new headings that you've added into the document, right? I'll say, okay, that's that. That's a table of contents. All right, so that's the way that that works with text and heading styles. All right, so we want to get this document set up, ready to go for us so that we have everything sort of in place. Then we can take our content and we can start moving into it. All right, now let's talk about what if I'm writing my paper in chapters, but each of the chapters is separate, right? I've got each of these chapters that I'm building, I'm turning in, I'm giving reviewers, they're giving me feedback. I'm doing these as separate papers that I then want to integrate at the end into a single massive document, right? You absolutely can do that, and research papers are a great way to do that. There's a couple things that you may want to take into consideration when you go to make that final big super paper, right? The actual dissertation itself. One, you'd want to follow this same template, right? Building up this outline for all the different sections and as a skeleton for it. And then I could come back into my chapter 1, right? And I can copy the text, right? Choose all the text that is my chapter 1, bring that over and put it into chapter 1 here inside of this paper, right? And then I'd want to take and say, okay, now let me go and let me make sure I add the references, because PERRLA is going to do things, right? We do things inside of your paper that not all referencing solutions do, right? So if you have, say, multiple references that all cite the CDC as a single source, we're going to put A's, B's, C's in front of those correctly to match, right? And so you'd want to come into PERRLA and say, great, let me go to my references library and let me add all the references inside of my reference library. I'm just going to add a couple more here. We're going to remove this one and we're going to add it back. So it actually is just there and consistent. So I don't lose my mind thinking about this in the middle of our webinar. Bigfoot culture, we'll also add this Coltman reference right here. It's Bigfoot culture and Coltman. Great. All of those are in there. Okay. And it's going to show up in the list correctly now. And I don't have to worry about it anymore. There we go. So that's the way I'd move those chapters over, right? And I'd go into my reference library. As you're building those references, PERRLA is keeping track of those references in your library so they're there. You don't have to recreate them. Just add them in. And then repeat that for chapter 2, right? Go to chapter 2, pull chapter 2's content out of here, paste it in here, add those references, okay? Making sure that you're doing that one by one for all of your chapters, piece by piece. And then you've got this document that's pretty close and looks really good at the end, all right? One thing that you may need to do, this is always when you're combining those chapters, especially, it's like, hey, I'm using CDC in chapter 1, and then I use a different CDC article in chapter 2. Right? Now that I have a combined dissertation, I have 2 CDC articles and they're going to have an A and a B, right? Is making sure that, hey, let me look at the citations, because I move those citations over from a single paper into a merged paper. Like, let me look at those CDC citations and make sure that they match up. And if they don't, you can either take it, you can manually fix it, or just remove that citation and recreate it using PERRLA. And we're going to re-put it in there with the A and the B correctly. Okay, so that's how you can kind of merge those different things together. Let's talk about that as well. As you're working with these documents, right, we have those content controls. So let's add, I'm going to add just a little bit of text. We'll add three paragraphs of text in here for us, right? So let's add a citation. I'll make this a little wider so you can see it a little bit better. Let's add a citation for Coltman and Davis right here. All right, we build the parentheses, and we build the citation, and it's got that content control in there. Let me tell you a little weird thing inside of Word with content controls. The space that a content control lives inside of a Word document is sort of like on top of the text. It's like laid on top of the text that's actually there. When you're providing your paper to your professors, to your readers, right, for review, they'll often use track changes and they'll use comments, right? So let's go over to the review tab here inside of PERRLA. Now let's say, hey, I want to leave a comment on this sentence here, right? Not a problem. I can say new comment. Great. Hello. I've got a new comment on that sentence. However, if I try to leave a comment inside of a content control, right here, Word disables comments inside content controls, okay? So you say like, well, that may be frustrating for my reader, or it's just something I don't want to have to keep up with, right? Or have to explain to them. Not a problem. We're going to come over and we're going to use the I'm finished button inside of PERRLA. This is a very important button that allows you to create what's called a clean copy of your paper. Okay, this will create a clone of your paper, but all it does is it removes the content controls out of the paper itself. So when you have something like a dissertation, right, you're going to have a lot of drafts and you're going to want to keep up with each of those drafts. You're not going to want to have just one version of your paper, right, that has everything in it. And that's the only file you got. So, no, you're going to have, I've got my October draft, and then I've got the November draft, and I've got the November 15th draft, and the November 17th draft, right? You have this nice history so that if you decide, like, hey, I had something that I wrote, 6 months ago while I was working. I don't have that anymore because I thought I didn't need it, but actually I do need it now. I've got a draft of that saved and available for me to go back to, right? That's why we keep lots of versions. Usually when you're working as a doctoral student, right? It's a good idea to keep lots of versions of your paper available to you, right? So I would do this and I'd say like file, save as, right, on my desktop. The way I like to do this, I'd say 2025, 10, 15, right? A big dissertation. I'll do that year, month, day, right? It's from big to little. So that way, when I get a bunch of these stacked up, right, be 20, 25, 10, 15, 16, 17, right? They're going to stay in that order, especially if I'm working on this through a year. So if I get to 2026, right, I don't want January 2026 showing up before October 2025. It just helps my brain like process that. It's just one good idea. So you can do that, right? I can save this as 1015, right? Great, I've got that. Here it is on my desktop, right? 1015 right there. When I make this clean copy, here we go. We have our clean copy right here, just like we saw a second ago, right? Those comments are still in there, right? That came in from before. But as you can see, that content control is gone. And so I can come into review, I can make a new comment here, right? Why is this important? Two reasons. One, it doesn't frustrate your reader. That's great. We want them to be on our side. We don't need to give them any reason to be frustrated with us. But two, this has created a new version of this document that they can take and they can modify, they can leave comments on, they could move things around, they could type in. It doesn't actually affect the working version of my paper, which is right here. It's a totally separate version. And so what I would do is I would take and I'd say file, save as, right? 2025, 10, 15, draft for revisions, right? Or for readers. I could do that and I could save that to my desktop, right? So I have a separate document. So now my reader could come in here and say like, this is terrible. Remove this, right? They can leave me all sorts of constructive feedback on my paper. And then they give this document back to me, right? It's very tempting sometimes to say like, yep, check, 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 resolve these comments, resolve those changes that your reader may have made. However, this is your dissertation. This is your thesis. This is your academic work. And for me, when I was doing my master's thesis, I wanted to make sure that the work I was doing represented me and my thoughts. It's always good to listen to your readers, but you can also take that with a grain of salt, right? I need to make sure that what they're saying makes sense for the argument that I'm trying to make in my paper. And sometimes you may have multiple readers that have multiple perspectives, and they're going to suggest you make changes that are in conflict with one another, right? You have to be able to reconcile that. And so what I like to do is I like to actually have a separate version that has the revisions from those readers available that I can then decide, yeah, do I want to actually remove this or not? I say, nope, that's actually a fair criticism. I want to take it. I'm going to remove that sentence because it really doesn't fit. And so I am actively resolving. I am actively acknowledging and bringing those changes and those comments into my paper so that I know, yes, this paper is my work. It represents the argument I'm trying to make, that I want to make, not necessarily just the voice of somebody else. This is a great way to provide this document to your professors, right, for feedback, where they're going to be able to do whatever they want, and it's not going to affect what you have at all. Even if you accept all of their suggestions or their feedback, you're not sort of stuck into it. Okay, we're going to try to wrap up with research notes here and then open up for a little bit of discussion. So inside of PERRLA, you have a button up here called Research Notes. Okay, let me show you how this works when inside of the Google Chrome extension. So here I am inside of Google Chrome. Now, our Chrome extension works inside of Google Chrome, obviously, but it also works inside of any Chromium browser. So that includes some things like Microsoft Edge on PC. It also includes some other browsers like Brave, and there's like 4 others. Vivaldi is one, where you can install Google Chromium extensions. All right. I need to move the little zoom window out of the way. I can come over here. I've got a reference for melanoma. This was a reference that came up through a user recently. And here I have my PERRLA Chrome extension up here, a little in the extensions bookmark. If you're curious about how to install this and do it, we've got a great article in our help center that's got a video telling you how you can get this installed. I'm going to click this little menu here. I'm going to go Research Notes right here on the side. All right. And you can see, hey, it looks like we have a reference already in our library that matches the page that we're on. Schadendorf, Birking, Greewenk, Gutzmer, Hauschild. Yep, here they are right there. I've got that in here. So let's take, and I got just some of the summary. Let's say that these first 2 sentences I really like. I'm going to highlight those. I can use the Chrome extension. I can say add research note. PERRLA's going to take, and it's going to, there finally logged. It's going to pull in the content that's highlighted on the page as a note inside of this reference. It's going to go ahead and put a double quote around it because this is quoted material that we have. It does replace any existing double quotes with single quotes in there. I can just press enter right there, and it's going to create that note for me. And it creates a citation by default, right? By default, it doesn't have a page number in it. By clicking, I say, actually, this is going to be on page 5. If I knew it was on page 5, I can update that citation right there, right? So let's say this next sentence here, right? I want to use this as a research note. Great. I can come into PERRLA. I say add research note. There it is. Enter. Here we have our second note. I like that. I can continue this process building these research notes inside of PERRLA while I'm working. Okay, great. What do I do with these? Well, let's go back into PERRLA. Let's add a reference from my library, and let's add that Schadendorf reference. Right here. I'm going to add that to my paper, right? So it's going to get added into the reference list, and it's also going to get added into the panel here, and I'm inside the research notes panel. If I come down here, Schadendorf, show research notes. Look here, those are those research notes we just created a second ago. Now, what do I do with this? Well, I can take and add it into my document. So let's say I want to add it into the end of this. I'll say plus right here. Perrla's going to take, it's going to add that note right there. See inside those double quotes, and it's going to add that citation for me. I do need to make sure that I update that period at the end to make sure that's correct. Let me turn off this show hide character so you can see that more clearly. There you go, and it marks it as green, knowing that I've actually used this already inside of my document, right? So I can take and I can add these notes from my reference library, right, inside of PERRLA into my paper directly. It's going to build those citations for me while I'm creating that research note, and I can reuse it later on in any of my papers, right? And it marks them as used, right? So I can see I've got research notes here for this one. I've also some research notes up here for this Bigfoot culture reference, right? That I can take, and I can also search across these easily. It'll sort of search through the whole thing. Mortality. Right, there you go. It's going to search across all the notes for me live. So that's research notes, right? You can take and you can create these references as you're building sort of the little papers through the semester, as you're doing your research, especially as you're doing like your reading, as you're preparing for your dissertation and doing those reading exams, right? Having all these notes on hand inside your library can be really helpful, because when it comes time to actually write that chapter, got all that stuff built right in, and you can sort of move it right into your document. Okay, that was a lot. We're ending with 15 minutes left here, which is the amount of time I wanted to make sure that we had for questions. So I'm going to make sure everybody, you can absolutely unmute yourself. If you have questions that you would like to ask, you'd like for us to cover, throw them in. If not, I've got some additional things that we can go over and talk about.
Hi, Grayson. Thank you so much. This is very helpful.
Hey, Monique. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have one question.
Mhm.
How can we cite multiple authors
Oh,
without removing the content control, or is that even possible?
it is absolutely possible. And that's
Oh, good.
a great question. I love that. All right. So let me share my screen again. All right. So let's go here. And can you see I've got these citations in here? We'll do this Coltman and Davis reference, right?
Yes.
So let's say that for this, I was using material from diverse sources, multiple sources inside the single sentence, right? So I've created the first citation, right? And it could be any of them. I can place my cursor inside the content control. Okay, so I'm just going to place it inside that citation. And let's say that the other reference that I cited is actually the Bigfoot culture, right? I pulled from Coltman and Davis and Bigfoot culture. Add citation, page 65, create citation. Now, I chose Coltman and Davis and Bigfoot culture specifically because those have to be alphabetical inside of that citation, right? When it's merged, PERRLA
Right.
handles the alphabetizing for you. So it doesn't matter which one you create first. We're going to take and make sure that when you get that merged citation, it's sorted correctly. So now you can see I have my citation for Bigfoot culture, 2020, page 65, semicolon, Coltman and Davis, 2006, right? I can repeat this again with the Peck reference if I wanted. You can cite as many references as you want inside of that citation. I mean, it had to be a pretty hefty sentence in order to have 3 citations inside of it. But there you go. That's how you can do that. You do have to do that while you have the content control right inside the PERRLA version of your paper. That
Okay.
content control allows us to know. But when I make a clean copy of this, it keeps all this formatting the exact same. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Does that raise any additional questions from you?
No, that helps a great deal.
Good, good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. One of the reasons we have these content controls, especially like, I'll show you, it allows us when we keep up with that content, right? If I took and I had this reference and I thought, oh my gosh, it's not Gregory Peck. It's my brother, Gregory Pack, who wrote this book, and I've typoed this incorrectly, and I am 200 pages into my dissertation, right? I can update that reference inside of PERRLA. Because we know where all those references and citations are inside of the paper, we automatically go back through and we update all the citations and the references to match. So now it's Pack instead of Peck. It's one of the reasons that, also one of the benefits of having that there. Great. All right. Other questions from anybody?
Hey, Grayson, this is Neil.
Hey, Neil.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Okay, when you create a new reference
Mhm.
from scratch in Perla, can you
Mhm.
do it from a DOI link?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Neil. You absolutely can do it from a DOI link. And DOIs are actually going to be the most accurate and quickest way to create a lot of references. So when I go into PERRLA, right, to create a new reference, and I can do that here inside of my paper, I can also do that from inside of the Google Chrome extension, right? I can create new references here as well. I can also create them inside of PERRLA Online, right? Um, but if you do that in any of these places, it works the exact same. Okay. So if you're searching for a book, a journal article, or a website, you can use a ISBN number for books, a DOI number for any journal article, and a URL for a website. So I keep just a handful of DOIs on hand, right? This is the Coltman and Davis one. I've used it before, but you'll get to see. I've got that DOI. I can paste that in and I can click search. It's going to say, yeah, you've already made this reference before. I know, I know. I'm going to create a copy of it. It goes to Crossref and it pulls the bibliographic information from the Crossref database. And it's going to pre-fill my reference form for me. Now, it's always a good idea, even though Crossref is incredibly reputable, it was some human who typed this in to Crossref's database. And humans make errors, even like AI, right? We're normal. And so I want to make sure I review this information in the form before I just click create to make sure that the person from the publishing house put that information into Crossref correctly, right? And PERRLA does provide you that help text inside each of these fields to make sure that, yeah, if I am a little confused, I want some extra guidance on how to do this, it gives me that. So I can say like, yeah, this is actually matching up. This looks really great, right? I can take, I'm going to say next. I can add optional descriptions or tags. Tags is actually really great. I'm going to talk about this. So I can add tags, biology, Bigfoot, to my reference while I'm creating it. Okay, this is a great way to organize your reference library. So I'll say create. This is going to do something really interesting because now we have two Coltman and Davis references inside of this paper that are both from 2006, right? And so PERRLA is going to take and it's going to update. You notice that that citation there is going to get the B in it because it matches up with that Coltman and Davis reference all the way down here inside of my reference section, which now has an A and a B. Now, talking about that tag, when I add those tags to my library, I can actually search by those tags inside of my reference library. So if I do hashtag, or I grew up calling it a pound sign, right? Pound sign, hashtag Bigfoot, it's going to take and it's going to show me all of the references that have that tag associated with it. So I can take and I can create categories for my references using these tags. And then when I'm working through my library, right, especially as a doctoral student, you're going to get hundreds of references in your library. It can help you keep them organized. One of the things we've got on the books for this upcoming within the next year is actually going to be rebuilding a whole tags UI inside of PERRLA Online to allow you to manipulate and see and organize and work with those tags in a lot more intuitive, straightforward way. But tags are a great way. So yes, when you create a reference, to get back to your original question, you can search by a DOI, and searching by a DOI is absolutely the easiest way to create journal articles inside of PERRLA. That answer your question for you?
Excellent.
Good.
You certainly have. Thank you very much.
Hey, not a problem. I am happy to help. Any other questions out there from anybody? You can ask multiple. It's all right. I will say one thing, as doctoral students, for many traditional like bachelor's, even master's students, right? You create books, journal articles, websites. That's sort of the bread and butter of most of your references. As a doctoral student, you may get all sorts of interesting references that you actually end up tackling over the course of your research, right? Especially if you are doing surveys or information and data sets that you're having to pull in. You can create those common reference types here, but the all types tab, this is incredibly helpful as well, right? We can create every single type of reference that's in the APA manual. We use the APA manual in building our reference engine. And so it's going to look a lot like those APA reference examples that you see. So if you've got things like conference and symposium materials, other dissertations and theses that you're citing, grants, informally published works, interviews that you may have done with different people, right? Reviews, apparatus and equipment, data sets, right there, that is, artwork, film and movies, lectures, television, videos, legal works, right? And things like social media, stuff like that. You can create all of these reference types with PERRLA. Books, journal articles, and websites are the only ones where you can search for the information manually or by, automatically. But if I have a manuscript, right, I can choose manuscript and I can create this reference still here inside of my paper, inside of the Chrome extension. I'm just going to have to type that information in because there's not a database for manuscripts to really draw on like there is for DOIs in Crossref. But all of those reference types are there and are available. And when creating those references, is the last thing I'll point out before we start to wind down. A lot of people overlook this very first question inside of the reference form, where you can choose the type and kind of book that you may be citing, or the type and kind of journal article, right? Because you have journal articles, but you also have journal articles that are in a database, right? And if it's a journal article in a database, we actually need to ask you what the database name is. So we update that form, right? If it is a republished journal article, right, we have the publication information plus the original publication information, right? Where was it originally published? If it was a special issue or a section, it has different questions. If it was a foreign language or a translated article, right, we're going to automatically ask for a translator as some of that information. So make sure that this is a part of the reference form that you take a look at when you're creating that reference, because there's all sorts of varieties of references that can be created inside of the APA and MLA and Turabian. And PERRLA can handle all those, but you just got to make sure that you are telling us, yeah, this is a foreign language or an in-press article or an editorial or a retracted article even. And then we're going to be able to ask for the correct information to build you a correct reference. Okay. Well, you guys, I really appreciate everybody taking the time this evening to join us. It was really fun going over this with you. As I mentioned, we are recording this, so we'll post it up on our social media and on YouTube tomorrow. So if you want to come back and you want to revisit this, go through it a little bit again, you're more than welcome to. Our support team is also here. We would love to help you. If you run into problems while you're tackling the dissertation, right? One, take a deep breath. You're going to get through it. We're going to help you get through it. It is possible, and you can absolutely crush it. But it can absolutely feel overwhelming, and we're here to help when it does. Okay, that's the whole point of PERRLA, is to make it easier to tackle these kinds of papers and to take these steps in your career, in your personal life. If you're doing it just for funsies, but we want to make sure that we're a part of that journey for you. So thank you so much for joining this evening. I hope everybody has a wonderful time writing. We're here to help if you need us, and have a great weekend or evening, night, whatever.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.